This bike is incredible. It's 3D printed out of titanium, and pretty much the whole frame is titanium. So you've got titanium stem, a titanium fork, titanium seat post, and even the cranks are custom titanium. Now, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful, and it's got loads of innovative and interesting engineering design ideas in. I can't wait to show you. I'm going to tell you all about it and show you all the intricate and nice details on the frame, weigh it, and talk to Tom Sturdy, who is the man behind it, the creator of this beautiful bike. And we're actually in his shed right now. First, let's begin with a poll. 3D printed titanium bikes, hot or not? You can click on screen and be able to vote and let us know your thoughts. Now, 3D printed titanium, or additive manufacturing as it's also known, is a rapidly growing area of tech. And we've seen 3D printed titanium components on bikes before, I think most notably on the cockpits of the Pinarello Bolide time trial bikes used by Team Sky and Ineos. But this is the first time I've seen a whole titanium bike with 3D printed components throughout. And it really is. Oh, it's just incredible. Titanium has a number of advantages. So it's a very lightweight, very strong metal that's also resistant to corrosion. It's slightly heavier than carbon, and it's more expensive than aluminium. And using traditional manufacturing methods, titanium can also be harder to machine into complicated shapes. But people love the way that titanium bikes feel, and also in theory, a titanium frame can last forever, meaning that it's, you know, really sustainable design. And I'm a big fan of that. But Sturdy has taken the material processes used in sort of making titanium components to the next level and applied it into this frame. And before we get on to the 3D printing of the components, I mean, I'm just totally enamored by this amazing fade that he's got going on the frame there. It's just a really beautiful anodized finish that just fades to the natural metallic silver of the titanium. It's very nice. Good to see you, Tom, and thanks for inviting us down to your shed on this cold December day. The big question I've got, and I'm sure many of the viewers will want to know this, is how does a bike that's been built in this way ride? How does it feel compared to a traditional titanium frame or even a carbon frame?
Yeah, so obviously it's something that's difficult to put numbers on, the famous ride quality, but that's the core of what I do really, is optimizing that particular characteristic. So titanium's a famously very smooth material to ride, and the bikes do have a very smooth ride quality. Compared to a carbon frame, that's often what people would pick up on, is that you don't get the kind of vibrating or the jarring through the frame. The structure works actually in quite a similar way to a molded monocoque composite structure, and it's really efficient. So even though you've got that smoothness, it's not come at a penalty in terms of efficiency. So the bikes, they're really responsive, but it keeps a lot of the subtleties that titanium is famous for.
3D printing allows you to make much more complicated and intricate shapes than traditional manufacturing methods, but still retain structural properties and strength in those components. And what we have here is a lugged construction. So the head tube and this seat tube junction here and the bottom bracket, and also where the dropouts go, are all lugs that then titanium tubes are welded into. So I've got some here. This is a bottom bracket section that's been 3D printed, you can see, and this is a head tube here. And when they come out of the 3D printing, these components actually have quite a sort of rough surface finish onto them, and then they can be customized to what the individual customer wants from the finish of their bike. And there's actually a cool machine that's just there called a tumbler, which replicates kind of how pebbles on a beach get smoothed out over time, but does it much more quickly, and then you can get a really like smooth finish on these components. But just by being able to hold them like this, you can see how intricate they are, and these are really non-uniform, complicated shapes that just wouldn't be possible to be made out of titanium without this technology. There's some really nice details like these integrated seat post bolts on this lug here, it's just nice and hidden and tucked away on the other side, and it's very neat. And the part that I think really showcases what can be achieved with 3D printing titanium is the stem, because, well, it's an incredibly complicated, non-uniform shape, and I just love the way it flows seamlessly in this continuous line into the head tube. It's very neat, but also the cables are fully integrated in it. And, you know, this highlights the complicated shapes that you can create using this technique that previously were only achievable through using composite materials such as carbon fibre. And, well, the result is stunning, isn't it? Another thing that people will be wondering is that with, you know, 3D printing and stuff, like people who buy a 3D printer at home now for Amazon or whatever, you often print things out of, you know, basic plastics, and they're quite sort of brittle. So what's, you know, the material strength? You know, how strong are these 3D printed titanium lugs that are used in the construction?
Yeah, so that's a really important part of building any bike, is to make sure you understand the material you're working with, and it is different. So the 3D printed titanium will perform in a different way to machined titanium or even the drawn tubes, and so it's really important to understand what the limits are in terms of ultimate strength and its fatigue life, that sort of thing. It's challenging because that data doesn't exist publicly, certainly. Although 3D printing is used increasingly and by certain sectors has been used for a long time, it's very expensive, and so the people who do it keep that information to themselves because it's very expensive to get hold of. So I had to get hold of it myself. So as part of designing and building bikes in this way, there's a huge amount of testing that goes into it. So I'll print small little test pieces all the way up to complete components and put them through various rounds of structural testing so that I know what the limits are of the material in particular ways. And it can be surprisingly sensitive, so it can be influenced by the specific printing process, what machine it's printed on, how that might be heat treated or not afterwards. Even the surface finish can affect it, so there's a difference between a polished lug and a raw lug in terms of how they might perform over time.
Having a titanium fork, this is the first time I've seen a titanium fork. It's pretty unusual, and normally when you have a titanium bike, people will put a carbon fork in. So how does that sort of change things, and how does that feel?
Yeah, so I started making forks, well, with all the components to give me kind of full control, full design control over anything that I might want to change on the bike. It gives me complete freedom over things like tyre clearance, fork geometry, how that affects the handling, whether or not it has eyelets, what brake mount it has. All of those things can often create a compromise from a design point of view. And then when I started looking into it, I want to control those things, but also see what I can do to improve the overall package in terms of how well I can optimize it. In terms of it being 3D printed, that was important because it's actually quite a complex structure. So the stresses that go through a fork are quite complicated, and 3D printing allows me to change the wall thickness throughout the whole fork in order to respond to those stresses. So it's one of the most complicated structures on the bike. Yeah, you can change the stiffness of it in a lot of different ways in terms of how much it can flex backwards and forwards, twisting as well, and side to side. To a certain extent, the difference isn't night and day because all forks have to do a similar job. They all have to withstand the same sort of loads because they're all used in a similar application. It's not like it's kind of twice as flexible or twice as stiff as something. They're all fairly close when you start looking at things. But again, you do get the benefits that are inherent to titanium as well. So it is a surprisingly comfortable fork to ride without it feeling overly flexible or without losing that responsiveness.
And the cranks also fall into that. The cranks are incredibly fully 3D printed titanium, but again, the stiffness of the crank can be changed. So Tom says that he does actually stronger cranks for mountain bike applications. At present, the lugs are all 3D printed, but the tubes are drawn titanium tubes that then Tom buys in, cuts to the desired length, and also manipulates the shape of them to tune the characteristics of what he wants. This is most evident on the chain stays down here, which you can see have been heavily ovalized from a round tube just to make it stronger in that particular area of the frame. And one of the big advantages of composite frames has been that in addition to being very light, what you can do is really customize the shape of it and make incredibly intricate shapes, which is huge in bicycle design because it means you can create very aerodynamic shapes, and that's why we've seen the rise of the aero bike as a consequence of more carbon fiber being used to make bicycles. But with 3D printing and additive manufacturing, as is demonstrated here, it really does open up those possibilities of really complicated aero shapes. And you know, the idea of having a sort of titanium aero bike becomes a reality. It's something that we can do in the future. Onto the build and components on this particular bike, and being a custom bike, Tom has customized this one to be more suited to kind of all-round road riding and also in theory all year use. So we've got some, well, full eyelets on here for mud guards. You can see little eyelets at the back, and then this little very nice little bolt here that's tucked in away for full guards to be fitted on there, and it's a nice sort of anodized color on it as well, which coordinates perfectly with the anodizing on the rest of the frame. And there's just loads of nice touches along that line as well. So you've got a bit of anodizing on the titanium bottle cages here, and then the sort of lock ring cap on the chain set there on the cranks as well. It's just very classy, isn't it? Yeah, big fan of that. And then you've got a Sea Bear bottom bracket in there, I've just noticed as well. The drivetrain on the bike is SRAM Red Access on the rear mech, and we're taking advantage of the fact that that can be run as a 1x system with its inbuilt clutch. So we've got a single chain ring at the front, but it just creates a very nice, clean and simple look to the bike. I'm a fan of that. So we've got 12 speed at the back and hydraulic disc brakes front and rear, 140, 160. We've got a carbon railed, carbon bodied altitude saddle on the top there, which Tom assures me is actually comfortable. And then we've got the bars and the wheel rims there from Beast. And then out front, while we're in the cockpit area, there's a custom, obviously, 3D printed titanium mount that comes out the front, which is integrated a light into as well. Very nice. But how much does it weigh? Let's have a look. So I mean, well, that's just come out at 7.6 with a light on it, bottle cages and power meter pedals, which is seriously impressive for a full build. I mean, especially when it's got winter tyres on it as well. I mean, you could quite conceivably shave a couple of 100 grams off with some summer tyres. And to put that into context, well, Tom tells me that this frame weighs 1.2 kilograms, which is really impressive for a titanium frame, because for an equivalent size, normally be looking at about 1,400 to 1,500 grams for a titanium frame that was made in a traditional method. I mean, that is, wow, that's proper cool. And I appreciate you're a one-man band and an incredible amount of work goes into, you know, a fantastic bike like this, but you know, what's the damage? How much does a 3D printed titanium bike like this cost?
Everything's custom, so inevitably the bottom line does vary from one build to another, but most customers are spending around the £10,000, £12,000 mark.
I thought it was going to be more than that, to be honest.
I mean, it's welcome to be more.
Well, thanks so much for showing your latest creation. It is absolutely fantastic. And I look forward to what you come up with next.
Thanks very much.
I hope you've enjoyed this look at this stunning and really quite interesting bike. And let us know in the comments section below if you think this is the future of titanium and bikes, and if we'll see more like this. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on it, so fire them down in the comments. And if you've liked this video and looking at this bike, please give it a thumbs up, help support the channel and the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.